Hello, everybody. I am very happy to present this session today, talking about digital fabrication transforming citizens from consumers to producers. I have just realized that one of my stellar members of the panel is not in the screen. So I will very quickly present my three speakers that will be helping us delve into the complexities of the maker movement and how this movement is creating more opportunities for citizens to become producers, creators, to contribute, to learn, to obviously drive a new way of innovation that will hopefully have very positive repercussions in our economies and our societies. So here with me, I have Annibale D'Elia, who's not in the poster but is here, and he's from the city of Milano. We have Vickery Bowles, the CEO of Toronto Public Library, and Tomas Diez is the instigator of the Fab City Initiative and director of Fab Lab Barcelona. So after these brief presentations, I will invite my first guest to delight you with a 10-minute presentation. Then Vickery will do the same, and then Tomas will have a heated debate for 25 minutes, and then I'll open up the floor to your questions. There are two ways in which you can ask questions. One is by being very brave, standing up in front of the microphones and addressing your questions to the speakers. The second one is through the mobile app, which also allows you to just shoot your questions in there, and I will be browsing them from here. Thank you very much, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Where's my presentation?
Well, we don't have his presentation. Do you want to improvise?
Oh, no, please. Can we change the order if it's possible?
You upload the presentation?
Sure,
Yes.
with the guy that helped me.
Yeah?
You have in the USB here?
Oh. Just bear with us as we upload the presentation, because we keep on talking about the amazing promises of technology, and yet, as you see, technology can fail. Imagine when you're running an entire city out of a centralized system, and then this happens. Car crashes.
Better when you bring your own computer to present, there's less chance of failure.
Okay, so time is running. Are we good? Brilliant.
Okay, I'm the missing speaker, and I'm sorry for the delay. My name is Annibale D'Elia, and I work for the Municipality of Milan. My role was is the Director of Economic Innovation and Entrepreneurship Support. Well, I'm gonna talk you to this program that we launched some month ago. This is called the Manifattura Milano. I had just more or less 8 minutes, but we spent a minute for the presentation, so please help me to stay in time. And well, you know, we're talking a lot about manufacturing, but you know, manifattura is a Latin word. It means done with the hand. So we decided to start with this to choose this title for our program, Manifattura Milano, and these two images are from the past and maybe the future on the manufacturing industry in Milano. But there's a problem, you know. In the second image, there's no people. There are no workers. So this presentation is about the role of new technology, but also the challenge that we have to face is about creating new jobs. Well, this is our background, and it is about the role of the manufacturing industry in our city. And as you can see, it's still a strong role. We got 36,000 enterprises that creates more than 350,000 jobs, actually. And there are a lot of craftsmen involved in manufacturing activities. And we received the results of a survey done by the College of Europe. And there's some data that was very shocking for us. And the results was that 25% of the revenue generated in the city are connected to manufacturing. It means it is a strong role of manufacturing still in the city today. And Milano is the first city in Italy for so-called manufacturing consistency. That means the number of enterprises and people that are working on sector. And this is also the first city in Italy for the number of manufacturing startups. So this is our starting point. But in Italy, in Milano, there's also a vibrant makers movement. At the moment, there are 10 Fab Labs that are connected to the municipality. There's a public register. And one of the most interesting things is that these 10 Fab Labs are, for the majority, private firms. 7 of them are private firms. There's also one NGO. There are 2 public spaces connected to a museum and another one to a university. It means that there's a strange relationship, there's a strong relationship between the maker space and the Fab Labs actually based in Milano, and also the economic ecosystem of the small and medium enterprises of the town. And we have also a tradition of policy for support the makers movement through small-scale public financing, but just for cover the investment cost. It means that you want to help Fab Labs and Makerspace to reach for economic sustainability. This is very important for us. Actually, we launched a new open call to help new Fab Lab and encourage them to open in the outlining areas. You can see there are some areas of the city that are not covered, so we want to help the opening of new spaces like that. Well, and this is about the vision. In this moment, everybody is crazy about the central government policies to support the digital transformation of medium and small and big industry, to buy new technology. The so-called 4.0 industry platform. And everybody in the world is thinking about that. But we want also to remember a vision that is, figured out through this image. This is a very famous illustration coming from The Economist magazine in the 2012. And it is about the main characters of the 4.0 revolution. The number of this magazine was called the Third Industrial Revolution. So people are a little bit confused about the third and the fourth and the third. So, and the main character of this kind of revolution are small-size factories first, flexibility and mass customization, design, production, and consumption become closer, and low environment impact and zero waste. This means that cities have an opportunity to boost a new wave of economic development based on this kind of technology. It's not just a matter of digital transformation of very big industries, you know? And we want to come back to this vision. And then another key point that is very important for us is that we don't have to leave everything to the revolutionary. We think that the public government has a role, not just to defend the existing situation, but to help this wave to go in the right direction. And this is about fear. This is about the main threat that we think that we are facing about, because you know, actually there's a growing fear of innovation. And on the right side, there's the results of a survey, and it is about 8 million jobs that may be lost in the coming years in the field of digital transformation. So the question is, how can we reimagine, how can public authorities can manage this situation to help the creation of new jobs? This is the challenge that comes from the political program of the municipality. It is based on two simple words. The first is innovation, and the second is inclusion. We imagine a program of things to do just to combine these two things. We can imagine innovation without thinking about inclusion. And we also have to reinvent the system to include the weakest people. And this is a image, this is a picture from a very inspiring exhibition in the Triennale, International Triennale in 2016. This is about a sort of an exhibition about all the enterprises that are able to combine artisan know-how and design and technologies and community. And in our opinion, this can be a possible Italian way to the 4.0 revolution, because, you know, Italy has a strong role in the field of craftsmen of high quality. And this is the title of our program. It's called Manifattura Milano. Of course, it aims to build in Milano an enabling ecosystem about new kind of enterprises that are able to mix traditional know-how and innovation, of course, to create new jobs, to regenerate suburbs, and of course, to promote social cohesion. And this is a 6 area of intervention. Of course, my time is almost finished, but you can download the full presentation from the municipality website. There are 6 areas of intervention. It's about study and research. It's about communication. It is, of course, a very important tool for the awareness. You know, this kind of challenge is a cultural challenge. We have to change the mindset of the traditional economic players of the city. If you are ancient bottega of high quality, you have a lot of things to do and to exchange to a Fab Lab. And of course, the opposite is the same situation. And we are working on new kind of laboratories and services, like incubators dedicated to this kind of enterprises. We got a piece of policy about the reuse of discarded urban spaces. We got money to finance investment support, and of course, a matter of education and training. And just 1 minute about the methods that we are trying to follow. And you know, we think that we have to learn from startups. You know, we have to imagine not a big master plan, but we have also to move also failing fast, you know? So we think also that we don't have to import some model from Barcelona, from New York City, or from Toronto, from wherever. We have to imagine a sort of modello Milano. We have to work in an agile way. So can we imagine a fail fast policy making approach. We think that we can do it. And of course, it's a matter of open governments, because we have to involve citizens, of course, but also enterprises and also research centers. And, you know, in Milano, there's one of the most important design week in the world, and that is an asset very important for us. And so, come and join us. And this is the beginning of a big challenge and a long travel. So, we hope to do our best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vickery. I'll invite Vickery to the stage now to tell us stories from libraries in Toronto.
Where is my presentation? Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Oops. How do we get? Okay. Well, thank you very much. You know, I'm really thrilled to be here today, but I'm particularly thrilled because public libraries are being included in the smart city conversation. And increasingly around the world, there's growing recognition that public libraries have an important role in the 21st century in terms of helping cities achieve their urban agendas, and especially to help achieve a city becoming a smart city, being able to provide everyone in the city with the opportunity to reach their potential and for there to be economic and social equity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Toronto. And I have to say that in Toronto, the role of the public library in making a smart city or supporting a smart city is recognized. The library is part of the City of Toronto's Smart City Working Group, which is being led by the Economic Development Department of the city and the Toronto Region Board of Trade. And then, of course, I'm here today, and I suspect I'm the only public librarian here at this conference. This is a really exciting time to be working in public libraries. Public libraries are busier than ever, offering a greater array of services than ever, at a time when our customers are expecting more than ever. And this is all happening, of course, at a time when the ways in which people live and work and play is changing. And so it's important for the library to change with that, so that we remain relevant to the people that we're serving. And it's important that it's not just in terms of what we offer, but how we offer it. And of course, public libraries are continuing to do the things we've always done. We help the student who needs quiet study space. We provide the entrepreneur with access to computers and public space so they can actually have a startup and an office at the library. And we also help the children who need to learn to read and develop their own literacy skills and a love of reading that we know is so important to a lifelong success. But today, the traditional ways of accessing information and opportunity and of making connections are giving way to some powerful new trends. And first among them, and I certainly don't have to tell this crowd this, is technology. A truly smart city is a place where people have the opportunities to engage in the economic, educational, social, and civic opportunities that are so critical to achieving prosperity, advancement, and overall well-being, not just for themselves, but for the city as a whole. That's a smart city. But despite living in one of Canada's richest cities, there are many Toronto residents who don't have equal access to these opportunities for success. Access to information and pathways to learning, the great equalizers of the 20th century, are foundations for lifelong success, and in today's environment, in the 21st century, are increasingly dependent on access to online services and networks, and understanding of and comfort with new and emerging technologies, the tools to make meaningful social connections and supports for lifelong experiential and self-directed learning. So while access to information has been critical in the 20th century, in the 21st century, access to technology is just as important. A huge part of modern-day public library service is providing access to new and emerging technologies, providing access to information, teaching digital literacy, bridging the digital divide, and providing the connectivity vital to today's social and economic success, vital for smart cities, and vital to ensure that nobody gets left behind. I think this slide is really important because this is something I think is not well recognized. Libraries serve as the backbone on which smart people, communities, and cities can be built and sustained. There's absolutely no other public institution that has the mandate and reach, physical and technological infrastructure, talent, and community presence to support digital inclusion and digital literacy for all. Libraries are creating these opportunities every day in ways that you may not think of when you think of the library. Internet access and Wi-Fi for sure, but also Wi-Fi hotspot lending, digital innovation hubs and pop-up learning labs with 3D printers, green screens, robotics, and makey kits, virtual reality headsets, 3D cameras, and whatever the next latest and greatest new technology is. Libraries also offer new experiential, collaborative, mentoring, and peer-to-peer and e-learning opportunities, hackathons, innovators in residence, meetups, and technology for e-learning. These efforts and opportunities aren't just beneficial to the individual. They feed a smart city. They bridge the digital divide and expand Toronto's knowledge, skills, and networks and engage learners of all ages so that all Torontonians have the opportunity to reach their potential and contribute to the success of the city. Connectivity and connections, the ability for people and ideas to come together and to collide in creative and productive ways is also critical to a successful and inclusive smart cities. Libraries help facilitate connections in many ways. One crucial way is simply by providing space. The lack of safe, welcoming, accessible public space is a challenge that many cities around the world are facing. There are fewer and fewer opportunities for people to easily come together, to be alone together. Libraries offer that, with spaces that help build connections between people and communities and between partners and others with whom we are collaborating. And increasingly, public libraries are designing our spaces, training our staff, and forming community and commercial partnerships to transform our spaces into places to create content and to work collaboratively with others. Today's libraries aren't just about what we have for people. They're about what we do for and with people. There are places for people to make, learn, collaborate, and create. So we run maker programs from knitting circles to Lego Mindstorm and coding classes, and we invite the maker community into the library. This picture here shows you a picture of our downtown Toronto Reference Library, and we've got a maker fair which we held annually. We've done this for 3 years. And there are dozens of community makers who set up residency for the weekend. And over the weekend, we have more than 12,000 people from Toronto come and participate to experiment, create, play, and make. And it's hugely popular. And we're also opening our first fabrication lab early next year with laser cutters, sewing machines, and more. For our youngest learners, we lead STEM story times. And to make technology accessible and fun, we tour our pop-up learning labs throughout the city and with expert staff conducting interactive programming that lets learners of all ages experiment and create with new and emerging technologies. We run many hackathons and design challenges over the years, and recently we had an open data hackathon that looked at how the library could be addressing poverty issues in the city of Toronto. Libraries transform. They transform individuals, communities, and cities. They offer access, opportunity, and connections, and with the latest technology, this is achieved in ways we never dreamed of before. They are important catalysts for a smart city, unleashing the individual and collective power and potential of every resident within it. And that's why, for cities interested in becoming smart cities, in innovating and collaborating and in advancing the urban agenda, public libraries are more important than ever. Thank you.
Now you're in the slides. We'll invite Tomas Diez, our final speaker.
Yeah, I think that jumping from libraries is quite an interesting analogy to what is happening in cities today. And this is what I want to talk about in relation to how a new way of producing things or to making things is going to transform the urban environment. Sorry, it has been interesting how libraries have moved from providing access to knowledge with physical assets to provide access to skills through digital platforms, and now seeing how they are actually being able to host a new form of innovation in cities through production and fabrication. So that's one of the things that we question when we start to consider how the urban environment is going to be transformed by these small maker spaces that are starting to popping out around the world. And the truth is that if we start to think how cities are working today, we need to start to consider a new context in the world that actually is telling us that the growth of urbanization is going to ask us to create another 357 New Yorks in the next few years. So it means that we need to urbanize the world in a very high rate as we haven't done before during the next 90 years or so. It also means that at the current urbanization rate, we see that the consequences in the planetary scale is going to be huge, and we are compromising resources from all over the world in order to sustain the urban living as we know it today. The question is also like if we're going to rely on resources and kind of energy forms that actually has been with us only for a century, and if we're going to look into alternative ways of sustaining human life in these urban environments. Also, culturally speaking, we wonder if we are going to keep eating what we eat. And this is a big question in terms of the usage of natural resources like water or the land use in order to sustain this life in cities. So if you really want to make a change, you need to stop eating meat. And I have some friends in the audience that have done that. I haven't done that yet. And then at the same time, we see that there's a lot of promise in the maker movement, right? All these innovators empowered with digital tools, and we think that it's something new. But it's also that I wonder if it's an emergence. And if you look at many slums in the Big South or the Global South, you can see that making has been there for ages, and maybe forever. So the DIY cities of Latin America or in the African continent, or vertical slums. This is a project in Caracas, which is actually a slum that is 80 floors high, in which you can go to the gym in the floor 60, for instance. Or to think about how these emerging behaviors from citizens is going to produce a new type of value, which is not only measured in GDP. And this is through collaboration and through making. This is an experiment we did with students from Venezuela and trying to simulate a slum housing in Caracas, or in Africa, how the guys from Wafate are using electronic ways to produce 3D printers. No? So the question is this is providing a new emerging futures, and this is what we are trying to ask ourselves, and not only to reflect, but also to instrument inside the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia and our Fab Lab through different programs. We are one of the pioneering labs in the European Union. Also, we are leading global programs like the Fab Academy, collaborating with large companies. I have some colleagues that were working with IKEA some time ago, that we do the big project with them, or now promoting a new model for cities to follow this transformation in a direction that we think is doable. So when you Google Fab Lab Barcelona, you see this. You see people learning, you see houses, you see cars being made with local tools, and you see digital fabrication tools, so you see students playing with robots, for instance. Our work is multi-scalar. It's not only staying at the lab. It goes to the neighborhood, it goes to the city, and also promotes a global movement like Fab Cities. So the question is, under the current paradigm of planning and urban design or cities, we think that we're probably going to fail again. So we need a new approach to urban design and urban planning that actually comes from experimentation. And this is where we are trying to implement in the Fab City project, not only in Barcelona, but globally, in which we try to see how the way we produce things is going to be challenged, or is already being challenged as today, and that's actually opening a new form of planning and urbanization as we haven't seen before. So we're moving our economy to from a linear and extractive model to a circular and generative one, or at least that's what we want to believe. That is going to change global trade, that is going to change supply chains, that is going to change the new type of infrastructure, and the relationships between people, technology, and people, and so on. So if you think about this, we are not talking about everything should be made in maker spaces or fab labs. We're saying like we will need a new form of infrastructure in cities. And I think Annibale was mentioning like micro factories that appear at the scale of cities that produce things on demand that are connected with citizen innovation that happens in the fab lab, or products that are finished or in your house with your personal fabricator. Those are things that we imagine to happen in the coming decades, and we're starting to build from now. But one of the key component is experimentation. It's how to go from understanding the local ecosystem that is happening at the neighborhood scale as a distributed facility, as a distributed network of knowledge, not only at the global scale, but at the local scale. In this case, this is the example of the Poblenou Maker District, or the Fab City prototype that we are developing here in Barcelona. So this is a challenge that we started back in 2014, when former Mayor Xavier Trias pressed a button and started a countdown of 40 years. So we say that by 2054, cities should produce everything they consume. And the funny thing is that what started as an exercise or as a provocation actually worked. And after that, we had following cities, another 17 cities. And I'm going to show you some examples. For instance, Amsterdam, during the presidency of the European Union of the Netherlands last year, hosted the largest Fab City campus until today in 80,000 square meters, demonstrating for 4 months how these regenerative cities work in forms of self-sufficient houses, urban farming, robotics, on-demand production, and so on. The city of Shenzhen, which is actually one of the few cities that produces more than it consumes, actually ships products to the world, is part of this movement trying to see how they become enablers of this transformation of other cities in the world, which is quite interesting. From China being a factory of products to China being a factory of factories is one of the approaches that we're working with them. Detroit, Michigan. Detroit is actually the kind of the essence of the assembly line, being part of this transformation of the way we produce things by introducing new forms of producing inside the city on programs of urban farming and unemployment. Bhutan, which is a kingdom and a country which actually measures the happiness of its citizens, being part of this global movement as well. And finally, Paris, which I want to share because just last week has been awarded as the capital of innovation of Europe, thanks to the efforts that they are making with the Fab City project locally, together with the Fab City Grand Paris Association. And this is a prize of $1 million euros, that is going to be invested in activities related with the project. That's what we hope. So this is something that we're doing with other cities in the world, other 17 cities, together with Barcelona, including countries like Georgia or Bhutan, and regions like Occitanie or Kerala in India, in which we are trying to, not only make things, but make place, make communities, thinking about the skills of the future that probably are going to be needed. The libraries are going to be needed for that a lot. Thinking about that the only way to do this through open source technology, and we have to defeat intellectual property and the black boxes of technology, especially in this conference. And also enabling a more accessible digitalization of platforms and digital wealth for everyone. This is what we're doing. We started in Barcelona, as I say, 3 years ago. We're prototyping the cities. We don't know how is it planned. It's not a 200 pages plan, massive master plan. It's an experimentation movement, and we're building it with the global collaborators. If you want to know more, go to fab.city, and thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So many amazing presentations. We have seen how a few years ago we started talking about maker spaces and Fab Labs, and it looked like it was this fragmented movement of spaces with some like machines that some people would go and use in some garage. And now we've seen how a city like the city of Milano is transformed, is including the whole concept of manufacturing and the fourth industrial revolution into city strategy, how Toronto is harnessing public libraries to transform these spaces of hubs for the future of making, supporting the development of skills and capacities, and going through from maker spaces, from Fab Labs to Fab cities, and then created a transnational movement that really conveys these principles and messages across the world. So we've come a long way from the last few years, and there are so many questions that I would like to ask you. But the first one is one that strikes quite a lot since you were talking. I was remember in the previous panel on data, Francesca Bria, the city of Barcelona, said, this is the fourth industrial revolution. It's going to be the first revolution, industrial revolution, where more jobs are going to be lost than created, which somehow clashes with this idea of employability through new capacity and so on. What is your stake on this?
Well, does it work?
Yes.
Yeah. Some weeks ago, I was in a conference about exactly these issues, about the future of work. And we were in a Fab Lab. And it was so easy to understand how technology can be used not to replace workers, but to enable people. Because, you know, in a place like this, we can see the ghost of unemployment, the idea of a very efficient city, but the question is, who will work in this kind of city? Of course, everything will work well, everything. There are public transportation very efficient, there will be buildings with new capacity to produce energy, okay, but who will work? And if you imagine the relationship between people and work and new tech opportunity, I think that to go in a Fab Lab, yesterday we were in the Fab Lab of Barcelona, and was an imagine so vibrant, so alive, something of so distant from the idea of unemployment and to be passive. So I think that this is, of course, a challenge. This is not a defined recipe, but I think the good direction. Probably the way that we are thinking to face this challenge is not to reinvent everything again, but put this movement in common with the tradition of a city and in the field of craft, of industry, of urban small-scale industry. So we can try to build a bridge between people that consider themselves so far and probably are very close one to each other.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. I think that.
Yes.
I think that I don't know. We have to ask ourselves if we really want to create more jobs and keep people employed, or if we want to make a bigger question and rethink what it means to have a job, what means to create value. And that's what I think is so important to start to think about how we measure productivity in a different way, because I think we are stuck in GDP. And this is like the Bible is there. It's GDP, and you are measured in relation to your GDP. But if you look at macroeconomic numbers, I mean, we have increased the GDP per capita like never before in the history of humanity, which is a nonsense because we're generating more wealth per capita, but that wealth is not going to where it should go. No? So I think that something is broken there, which is important to look at. And you know, the other question is, I think that yes, this fourth, fifth, third, whatever revolution is going to create less jobs, but it happened before. I mean, the Luddites were burning the textile factories in Liverpool back in the 19th century and the 17th and the 18th century. There's always been a fear of technology because it's going to take or going to remove myself from what I'm used to do and what is going to happen next. What is coming now is so big that we really need to think about the job thing and start to cheat ourselves and say, okay, maybe it's not jobs what we want to create, but create a new form of generating value and especially to distribute it.
Well, I would just add that public libraries have always been about lifelong learning. And that's what we were doing in the 21st century. We're just using the technology and teaching people about the technology so they have a better idea of what the potential is for them and the opportunities that the technology creates. So there are opportunities for skills upgrading, there are opportunities for people how to learn to use code, and that means that people can transition to new kinds of jobs when they have the proper skills and the ability to understand what digital technology is all about and what the opportunities are. In our digital innovation hubs, we have startups and entrepreneurs coming in and developing prototypes using the 3D printers and the Arduino kits and deciding whether they can develop their business plan based on this prototype. So it creates all sorts of opportunity as well as disruption. And I agree there's going to be a lot of disruption to business models and to the economy, but by giving people the opportunity to learn more and to be able to change as the world around us changes is a really important role for the library, I think.
So, Thomas has talked about, well, and you have as well, Annibale, talk about value and wealth production. Yeah. And this is, to me, very intimately associated to the impact that this movement is having. What value is it creating? What impact is it really creating? For the last 10 years, we have been so vocal about the need to have more maker spaces and more Fab Labs. And in fact, Barcelona has got its own Fab Labs maker spaces and the Ateneus de Fabrication, which is the public network. But we also know that Tech Shop broke and closed yesterday. It was the largest maker chain of maker spaces in the US. So what are the impacts that we have achieved so far, that have been achieved through this movement, and how are we measuring these impacts?
Just a short answer, just because this is the main issue we are thinking about in this period. I'm here for a European project. It's called Boosting Social Innovation. That's why we are with my colleague that are in the crowd right there, visiting Barcelona and also trying to understand your strategy. And we will meet all together in January in Milano. Of course, everyone is invited to think about two main issues. The first is how to finance this kind of innovation, and the second is how to measure this kind of innovation. So it's not easy to give an answer, but this is on the table as probably the first problem we have to face. But of course, I completely agree with Tomas. The idea that GDP is not enough, of course.
I think that the bankruptcy of tech shops is actually, I wouldn't say that they are exactly maker spaces or Fab Lab related. I think they were more like a gym. It's more like a gym with machines, which is quite different from the idea of generating community around a fabrication space, which I think that's the key aspect. If you think about the relative success of Fab Labs, which I say relative because for us, the growth of the network is a success. We have seen, like when we opened Fab Lab Barcelona in 2007, there were 10 Fab Labs in the world. And there are 1,200 today, and probably another couple thousand maker spaces popping around the world. And this happens around, I would say until now, around two things. One is education, as platforms for learning, I would say, not to educate people, but to learn, which is different. And the other one, I think, is around communities. The generation of communities around these spaces. And this is something that probably tech shops did not have. And then, they were like the proof of using a new, let's say, approach to technology with an old mindset. What happened with Tech Shop? It was like a McDonald's. It's a mix of a McDonald's with a gym and with a Fab Lab kind of thing. And so when you put all that together, I think it's a franchise with a very pay-per-view kind of type of model in which you are using this service in a very client-user relationship. It doesn't work. Going back to your question, because it's something that we have been talking about, and with these ideas generating tools for assess the impact of Fab Labs and the maker movement in general. I think that's, at least if you measure in big numbers, I wouldn't say that hard numbers, it's hard to see it. If you think about the open, it opens for imagination and open for possibilities of inventing things differently. So there's like it's some kind of hope, if you wanna call it like that. So now we have the challenge of proving that hope is a reality, and I think that needs to be done.
So I'm going to ask a question now, but I'm going to ask you to stick to the ladies first rule. You've taken the microphones and left her there. So, yes. I think it applies. With women working in technology in these maker moves, we have to fight for our space, no? So, okay, so there's been some talks about business models, and clearly what this shows is that there are as many business models for these spaces as there are types of spaces. The McDonald's Tech Shop business model clearly didn't work. There are some hybrid models where there's both public and private funding. And obviously, in your case, there is a situation where the public institution, the city council, is investing money from taxpayers into supporting this space. So I guess that you must have to be accountable for how the money is spent, which means providing some indicators about what is happening and how successful this is being, right?
Yes, absolutely. And what we've been able to do is we're actually in the process of developing we've got an accountability framework that's based on logic models for our programs and our digital innovation hubs, and a balanced scorecard where we're going to be reporting out on individual outcomes and community impacts. And we've been given actually funding from the province of Ontario to measure the impact of having access to technology in public libraries has on communities and has on individuals. And that is, so we are being able to show how, in fact, kids who come to the library to use this technology are becoming more engaged with their homework, for instance, and they're getting into more of a routine because they understand more and they're making more connections between what they're learning at school and what it means for them in terms of their future. So this is the kind of thing that we're starting to measure, and we're getting a lot of support from the city because they can see how it's drawing people in to participate in this new digital technology and learning.
Business models. We had.
Is this my turn? Yeah.
This is your turn now. Meanwhile, because we have the last 5 minutes, so if I've been looking at there's nobody there, so I keep on asking questions. Well, not now anymore. I'll go with your question in a minute, right?
Okay. I will be very short. Just to say this, in Italy we are facing a huge problem of cutting public funding and public budgets. So in Milan is happening something interesting because the lack of money is beginning something like a boost to reinvent the business models. Here, there are, in this study visit in Barcelona, there were two guys from two public spaces, from two maker spaces from Milano, with two business models completely different, and was also the opportunity to think, to talk about it. So I think that when you are in the middle of a revolution, you have to experiment. And actually, there are 10 maker spaces that are all independent and economically sustainable, and this can be considered, a good science and hope for the future.
Thank you. So we have one question from the audience. I'll ask you to introduce yourself first.
Morning.
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon. Costantino Bongiorno from Milano. I'm founder of the Fab Lab Makerspace. Thanks, Toronto, for founding your public library, because it was very inspiring during the last years, and we follow your activities since, from Milano. Thanks. And the question is exactly for you, because I think that libraries are a wonderful touch point for a broad audience and citizenship. So is in your library, are there in your library offices or services of the municipality concerning, for example, looking for new jobs or training provided by other agencies in the city, or, for example, welfare information, or just, let's say, core business, core activities like culture?
Well, we do all of those things. We have many partnerships, both with the public sector and the private sector, through our social assistance division at the city. So people who are receiving social assistance, we actually send our staff out to those locations, and they work alongside people who are trying to get a job, to show them how to use the internet and to develop resumes, and how they can use the resources of the library to become more economically stable. So we have 100 branches, library branches in the city of Toronto. So one of the great benefits of that is that we are in 100 different neighborhoods, and we're able to reach people where they live. So what we do is we customize our services to meet the needs of whatever communities we're in. And we have many immigrants that arrive in Toronto. So for instance, we have a partnership with newcomer services, and those settlement workers are actually located in our branches and help people with job searching, and then redirect them to our staff to help them with skills upgrading, with using the technology, with using the internet. And one thing I'll just say, I think, is that when I walked around here in this wonderful expo, and I looked at all this tremendous technology that we have here today, I couldn't help but think about the kids in the underprivileged neighborhoods of Toronto who, when we have to close at 8:30, plead with us not to close, because even though they have a smartphone, they can't finish their homework because they don't have internet access at home, and they need the internet access at the public library. Mm-hmm. So, now we keep our Wi-Fi on 24/7 so they can sit outside and use the Wi-Fi. And we have a Wi-Fi hotspot lending program where we lend Wi-Fi hotspots to underprivileged families so that they can use them, and it helps them get jobs. It helps them get connected to their social workers, and it helps kids complete their homework when they don't have internet access at home. So it's a really important connection that the public library provides, I think, in all of those different areas, as well as in terms of access to things like culture.
So I guess that answer, thank you very much for your question. That answers many of the other answers that were addressed to Vickery in the app. There's a question here for you, Tomas. We'll briefly ask you, how is Fab Lab Barcelona funded?
So that's a very interesting question.
Indeed.
I'm still trying to figure out. No, I mean, the Fab Lab started being completely funded by educational programs at IAAC. So it was invested by a private institution like IAC, which invested in the initial set of machines and, of course, on the operation cost for the first, I would say, 5 years of the Fab Lab. You need to consider also that it was when all of this was very, very new. And since 5 years, we are self-sufficient. Most of our funding has been translated from coming from educational programs to research programs, I would say, and research projects, especially from the European Union. So this is I would say, shows somehow our dynamic, which is going from just supplying the skills to translating those skills into projects that then can support funding. And I would say that our next challenge now is to turn those research projects into spin-offs or businesses that they can, again, generate income streams back to the lab. So our ideal funding structure would be 1/3 educational programs, 1/3 research projects, and 1/3 services and projects that we do for companies or for professionals, let's say. No? So this is more or less how we are funded as per today.
So the final question that has been posted by some of you, or someone in the audience, I would like to, I will put it on the table and ask to have a little remark from all of you, because that will be the end of our panel. So the question is, are citizens being seen here as passive or active producers? Do they create or follow orders in production line? How can you create creativity in people? Thomas, given that the microphone landed in there.
Yeah, I think that's something that we need to be very careful, like these innovation managers. It could be the best risk for innovation. So I would say that creativity is not something that you could manage. I would say that you can create the conditions for things to happen. And I think that's where these places, these kind of third places appear as they bring so much, I would say, openness and kind of a new approach of how this is done. You don't learn this in university. You don't learn this into the school. You learn it somewhere in which creativity needs to be put in place. And I would say that, in my opinion, that means, for me, creating conditions for creativity to happen and then let it happen, I would say.
I completely agree. I think that you have to, as Tomas said, you have to create the conditions. And I think the conditions are access, opportunity, and connections. And that's what the public library does. And there is no barrier to that, because everyone is welcome at the public library. And that's an important part of what I was trying to say about being the equalizer in the 21st century. It provides everyone with the opportunity to fulfill their potential and be creative, because they have access to the world of technology. They have the opportunity to create and co-create with others, and they can make connections with people and institutions to be successful.
Giving people the opportunity to put their hands on reality. I think that this is the most interesting challenge. I was in a conference in Turin, expert of civic tech, and we decided to use the word superpower to describe the technology. What is technology? We were asking ourselves. We said, okay, it's superpower. Superpower to move, to think, to remember, to communicate, like Spider-Man. And like Spider-Man, there's a strong connection between power and responsibility, So I think that public administration have to open as much as opportunities possible to help people to be co-creator of reality. And the message of the maker movement, it is not just about making in a technological way, but is a way to think to what is all around. It is not something given to by someone else, but it's something that you can put your hands on. This is a great perspective for the future. It's a great challenge. It's very interesting.
Thank you. So, digital fabrication, transforming citizens from consumers to producers. Clearly, in the last decade, the movement has increasingly reached maturity. We still have some open questions regarding how to fund this, how to assess the impacts that they are having, and how to scale up the movement so that it really produces common good. It increases the opportunities for people to develop skills and capacity, to develop new market forces or not, or to develop wealth that is redistributed. What is clear is that the movement is providing some superpowers and that we should remain optimistic about it. So thank you very much, and I ask you to give an applause for our stellar panel. Thank you.